Live. We are live, it says.
Woohoo.
Awesome.
Excellent.
All right. Well, this is new territory. Thank you all for doing this.
Yep.
Yeah.
We are live. So hello, everyone. Good afternoon and good evening and good morning for some of those. Well, we're all over the world. So thank you so much for joining us for our first ever. We are at our first ever Indie Roundtable Read. And tonight, well, tonight for me, but it's so very bright. So tonight we have 7 authors who will be giving you excerpts from their works and their drafts. And we have quite a lot in store for you all tonight. So are you all excited? We have anyone watching?
Woohoo.
And our authors excited? Just a quick roll call. We have Rebecca, Des, Dawn, Kyle, Evie, and Kristina. Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
So this is actually in time as well because I've read that June is actually audiobooks month. So some of us have audiobooks out. Well, some of those of us in the call right now, and we'll be trying out our stuff as well. Let's see how well we can read. Can we do it as well as those who are narrators already? All right, so let's begin with our. And this is hard.
Technology.
Live reading, and we will have our first one up. We have Rebecca. Hi, Rebecca.
Hello. You blanked out on me there for a minute, so I didn't hear some of that. All I heard was my name. And I was like, what?
Surprise, it's you.
I will still introduce you properly, but yeah, it's us again. So Rebecca Lemke is an audiobook narrator, YA author, artist, formatter, and hobby addict. We will not talk about your hobbies right now or we'll consume the 1 hour. Guess you can ask her about it later. And when she isn't writing, she is spending time with her husband and son in their Oklahoma farmhouse. Tonight, she'll be reading an excerpt from Blood of Bees. So Rebecca, take it away.
Thank you. After her, Silence screamed at the guards. The breeze rained down on him. That blasted girl had taken out a wall. What remained of it was ablaze. The guards scrambled to get to their feet and obey his order. Silence's vision blurred as he struggled to look toward the door. The girl's tantrum had blasted everything in the room, sending everyone flying on their backs onto the ground. Silence still lay on the floor, blood covering his chest. The smell of burning flesh gagged him. He squirmed, trying to get away from it. He watched the guards fumble out of the collapsing room to chase after her. The titanium shackles that had held her to the wall lay in pieces on the floor. None of the other Titans had ever broken titanium shackles, and now this one, his strongest creation, was gone.
Wow. So tell us a little bit more about your book, Rebecca.
So this is actually my first YA book. I started out as a nonfiction author, and that set me back about 5 years doing fiction. I don't recommend going into the genre that you don't plan on staying in right out the bat. But this book is the first in a series. It's super similar to Maximum Ride and Animorphs. It's clean YA, so there's no cursing, there's minimal violence, and there's no adult scenes in it. So it's safe. Even for homeschool kids, I would say 14 and up, but I have a lot of people give it to like their 10 and 12-year-olds, so without problem. But the whole series follows these kids that are modified genetically to have DNA spliced with animals or mythical creatures. And part of the series is finding out which ones are animals and which ones are mythological creatures. And I'm currently halfway through book 2 right now, finalizing it. So excitement.
That's great. So when will it be out?
September. It will be out in September. Yep, it's already up for pre-order. It's there.
Pre-order. That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Rebecca is also the narrator of the novel I co-wrote, Hotel Fans. I just had to pitch that in.
Yes, Hotel Fans is
first one up. It's the actual narrator. And that means the next one up is also actually a narrator. So this time we have Des Astor. So a creator of worlds, she has a taste for the dark and the dangerous. A dark fantasy and horror writer, she aims to shatter certain tropes and turn monsters into heroes. Very violent ones, of course. She warned us of this. She also enjoys blending biology into her works. After all, she graduated from the University of Connecticut with a bachelor's degree in biology. So currently, she's self-published and working hard on several writing and narration-related projects. She has recently delved into narration for both audiobooks and internet horror on YouTube. So let's welcome Des.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so in my case, I took a snippet from my narration. I'll get right into it. I did narrate the female parts, but she's not as interesting as a character, so I just picked him because he's better. So I will start sharing my screen, and hopefully this will go smoothly. Yes, they want to share that. Now, let's see, share sound. Okay, people should be able to hear it.
Several grueling days had passed, but it felt like years. Our metabolisms were eating away at us. Vampires were powerful, but starved much faster than most other species. The ribs were showing already on myself and my gang members. The wounds dotting me were taking much longer to heal, and rather than lunge out and battle like the fighters we were, my gang and I began to hide in the shadows. We might be known as the Crows, but now we were turning into feathered rats. Once more did I find myself in front of the mirror. How often did I do this shit nowadays? One might think I was egotistical. They'd be right. But that's not why I was looking at myself. My pupils were growing in size as the white continued to fade from my sclera. I might as well be an owl as opposed to a crow, but this was a very bad sign. My eyes shifting to pure black would indicate one thing: a complete loss of control. Letting out a sigh, I licked my fangs over and over again, unable to stop thinking about hunting. The feeling of wind rushing past me as I zeroed in on a target, their panicked breaths hitting my ears as their heart pounded in their chest, causing my stomach to snarl and growl like an angered wolf. I clenched at it, fantasizing about sinking my fangs into flesh. Some life-giving crimson liquid lovingly flowing down my throat, the only thing that mattered in the world. Drool began to trickle out the side of my lips and drip down onto my leather pants as slowly I found myself standing up, cracking my neck. My entire being was encapsulated by something I wasn't: a mindless beast. My voice wasn't my own as I walked out into the commonplace. There the crows were, staring at their claws, making no actions. Distractions didn't work. Clarice commented, "Boss, your eyes." Then she looked down to her own claws, twitching. "Hungry," she snarled. "My eyes are that way too. I checked in the mirror. What do we do, boss?" I blinked, an eerie grin spreading itself across my face. "We hunt," I snarled, more drool streaming down the side of my face. I was a rabid animal now, unable to think of anything but blood. Giving a low, deranged chuckle, I looked down to my claws. "Humans are our food. We can't hide anymore. We know the natural way of things, don't we?" Fists punched into the air as starved cheers rang out, coupled by hisses. No one spoke up to disagree. I was far too gone to go against this. "Little humans are put here for us to eat. We gotta stop hiding from what we are, don't we? One missing here, one missing there. Won't be too bad. We won't kill 'em. Hear me out. We keep 'em here and take what we need. We free 'em when this war subsides and figure it out. I don't fucking know. But we gotta eat. It's the way of things." My voice echoed in my head, and I realized I sounded exactly like that bastard of a brother and Ash. What was I turning into? No, no! Yes, blood. Blood. Need blood. I shook my head to clear it, and boy, did clarity come. That eerie sneer didn't fade, rather. It spread. You hear me? No more hiding. We take what's ours. The city is ours. The humans there are ours. It's about time we accept that. I ain't letting anyone die here on my account to save those cowards who destroyed their world anyway. I threw back my head and began to chuckle and giggle, as if this was all some huge joke. Our descent into starvation and madness was hilarious. We were turning into everything we weren't, and I loved it. My inner morality screamed and clawed at me, but I ignored it. This wasn't right, but that was okay. None of my brothers and sisters here would die of starvation on my watch. We'd bring food back one way or another.
So, yep. That was a demonstration of, okay, I'm not muted. Vampire descending into starvation. So he's supposed to be the hero of the story. Obviously, you could hear in his head he did not want that to happen, but he can't help it. And that leads into another interesting scene. But he is technically supposed to be, well, he is the hero of the story, not of that part. Things do work out though, but I'm not going to spoil it any further.
Okay.
Angry people are hard to deal with.
They are. But
Say
then
that
you
lightly.
mentioned this is a dual narration.
Yes, yeah. So there's
How does
another
that- how does
character
that
later.
work?
Yeah, so what we did was we went through Find Away Voices, and so I recorded my parts and I edited the entire thing, and then he recorded his, and then we put it all together and went on to Find Away Voices. And then my other books have like even more perspectives, so I'm gonna have like a triple, or I'm gonna have like a quadruple narrator thing going. So it's going to be interesting, but it's a unique thing. Like, I guess it's not very uncommon with audiobooks, but since I'm a perspective switcher, that's what I ended up doing. So why not, right?
So every chapter
That's
or
cool.
every chapter in that POV is that character narrating or something like that.
Yep. Every time he's talking, he is Aries, the narrator, and then when I'm talking, I'm Cecilia. I ended up getting stuck with the another crazy character, but that's okay.
Yeah, that's really cool. So thanks, Des.
No problem. Thank you.
Back later, and some people watching will have questions. So let's move on to our next reader. We have Kyle Robertson.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me, and thanks for joining us. So as you can see, my currently published book is called The Showstopper. It's a historical fiction thriller, takes place in New York City in 1922. But today I'm actually going to be giving a little sneak preview of the next book, very brilliantly called The Showstopper Returns. I know, very original. But yes, this is a little piece from the beginning of that second book, where my main character, William McKenna, finds himself in a bit of a familiar situation for those who have read my first book. Here we are. And this takes place we're in New York City. It's 1937 now, 15 years later, in the middle of the Great Depression. So not fun times. Hey, Mac, you're moving like molasses over there. Hurry up, will you, Grandpa? I'd like to eat my lunch sometime this century. You know, the one that already passed you by. Mopping sweat from his brow with a rolled-up sleeve, McKenna sighed and grasped the tongs in his hands, carefully lifting the red-hot cup of liquid metal and pouring it into the mold before him. Supposedly, it was for the rear end of a car, but to him it looked more like the ass end of a horse. Speaking of asses, he could hear Swift and his buddies carrying on behind him, slapping their knees and laughing at his expense. Not that he wasn't used to it. He'd been one of the older men at the plant for a while now, and he knew times were hard for everyone. You had to find a way to let your frustration out somehow. But still, there were days he wanted nothing more than to punch the smug looks off those young ruffians' faces. There, that should do it. Mastering his temper and raising his voice over the hiss of the setting slag, he put the heavy iron implements down and turned to face Swift, who was sitting atop a nearby oil barrel and checking his non-existent watch, to the hilarity of his cohorts. About time, the young man grumbled, pushing his greasy hair out of his face in an attempt to make him look more respectable than he actually was. I finished with my batch 20 minutes ago. You're setting new records for slow, McKenna. What, is Foreman paying you extra on the side to make us look bad? Foreman's tighter than a clam's wallet on a good day, lad. I don't think he's in the business of handing out money when he don't need to. McKenna raised his eyebrow, allowing himself some satisfaction as a bit of sarcasm crept into his tone. So what do you think? Nah, forget it. Swift's face twisted like he swallowed a lemon, and he spat on the ground, getting to his feet and tugging on his suspenders. Last thing I need's a lecture from some Irish bum. You know, I can't believe you used to be a cop, Mac. Don't you have to be, I don't know, fit for that? The scabby crew around him snickered as McKenna glanced self-consciously at his rather conspicuous beer gut. While the mean-spirited jab steamed him, it was true. He wasn't in the shape he used to be. That was what going 6 years without chasing down a suspect and then getting laid off the police force did to you. Damn depression. Well, I'm off, Swift chuckled as he watched the Irishman's ears turn red and gave him a wink. Gotta get a sandwich in me before I keel over. And again, maybe I'll make it half a sandwich. Don't want to end up like you, right? McKenna ground his teeth and struggled to think of a suitably biting comeback, but stopped as he did a mental head count. Hold on. There were 7 people on this crew. You, me, and your pals over there make 6. Where's the other man? Who cares? A balding, muscle-bound young worker demanded, folding his slab-like arms. You probably counted wrong, Grandpa. And even if there was, he probably fell into the vat and got himself fried, the idiot. How would you know, Nick? Swift shot him a withering look. You can't count to 5 on a good day. Still, no way I'm letting some jackass make me miss my lunch. Let's go. He snapped his fingers and jerked his head, signaling to the crew as they all turned to walk away. They stopped, however, as McKenna stepped in front of their leader, nose to nose with him. Don't be stupid, Swifty. You know as well as I do, if Foreman catches us with a man down, he'll make sure we all work double shifts. We're not done until we're all done. I don't give a rat's ass what that windbag says. Get out of my way, McKenna, or you're sucking around to get yourself pushed into the drink. McKenna folded his arms, refusing to budge. To hell with it. He had enough of this posturing pest to last him a lifetime. You think I'm afraid of you, Swifty? Please. I was a police officer on the streets of this city when your mother still had to show you where she was serving the drinks. I've seen things you couldn't even imagine, and you never believe even if God himself wrote them down for you to read. Do you even know how to read, you ignorant sod? The other men tensed, waiting to see who would throw the first punch so they could all take bets on it later. Swift's eyes narrowed dangerously. McKenna, he said, dangerously calm as he started to roll up his sleeves. My mother always did tell me to respect my elders more, but I think for you, she'd be fine with me making an exception. You know, seeing as you're a sad little Irish pork pie with a belly like a... But their conversation was interrupted by a shout of alarm. Oh, dear me, someone, help! McKenna and Swift both spun around to see another man, probably younger than either of them, stumbling under the weight of a large rolling tool. Before anyone could react, he caught his foot on the leg of a nearby boiler and tripped, crashing into the table of still steaming metal molds. The shells, filled with scalding slag, toppled to the floor and spilled their contents onto the concrete, making the men standing by jump back as what precious little remained of their shoe leather began to melt. Good Lord, McKenna exclaimed. Are you all right, lad? He took a step toward the stranger, now groaning on the ground, but was shoved aside by a furious Swift. What was that? The younger man stalked over and pulled the string bean of a man to his feet by his collar. You ruined our whole day's work, you stupid clod. We'll be lucky if we don't all get sacked because of you. Who the hell do you think you are? The man blinked, still dazed, and attempted an apologetic smile. Rogers. Sidney Rogers. I'm terribly sorry, sir. It's only my first day, and I've always been a bit clumsy. Not used to this kind of work, don't you know? Put the man down, Swifty, McKenna sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. It was an accident, that's all. Let's just clean this up before Mr. Foreman. Shut it, Mac. Swift's gaze never moved from Rogers' sallow features. Sorry doesn't cut it, you damn moron. But, sir, I really... Rogers was cut off as Swift shook him again. Stop calling me sir. Do I look like a sir to you, smartass? The young tough's lip curled into a snarl. I've got a good mind to bash your head in with a brick. Nobody's going to miss one less bum. Right, boys? Swifty, stop it. McKenna grabbed for Swift's arm, but the bully shrugged him off and raised his finger. Hold him. McKenna's arms were immediately pulled behind his back as he found himself restrained on all sides by the thick, hairy arms of Swift's foul-smelling comrades. He struggled to no avail as the younger man pulled Rogers close to him, dull eyes scouring his face. "So what's the story, you slug? You know, now that I think about it, your name sounds sort of familiar. You own a business or something?" Rogers gulped. "In a manner of speaking, sir. I mean, yes, that's all." McKenna realized the name was ringing a bell for him, too, and it didn't take him long to figure out why, as a cold sweat broke across his brow despite the heat. "Oh, bollocks." "What do you mean?" Swift demanded. "What is it you do exactly, other than monopolize the moron industry?" "Rogers, shut up. For the love of God, just shut." McKenna's hissed whisper was cut off as one of Swift's goons drove a fist into his gut. Meanwhile, Rogers clasped his hands together as he stood on his tiptoes, what was left of the cheap suit hanging off his gaunt limbs. "Well, I hesitate to even mention it," he choked out, "but you seem in earnest. Do you know Sanford and Rogers?" "Sanford and Rogers?" Swift's eyes narrowed, a new fury sparking to life. "You mean the bank? You're that Rogers?" Recognition somewhat recovering his dignity, Rogers allowed himself a small smile and a nod that only served to seal his fate. "Yes, that's it. It's nothing, though, honestly. Just a minor position on my way up to Wall Street and, well, you know." Only a strangled gasp finished the thought as Swift's hands closed on his throat. "You bastard." The young vagrant was nearly foaming at the mouth. "I had all my money in that damn bank, and you threw me out on the street with everyone else when all I did was ask for it back. You people are the ones who put me in the gutter and made me eat rats." "Swift," McKenna wheezed, trying to get his breath back. "Just stop this. You can't blame the entire depression on one man. Maybe he made some bad decisions, but it's not all his fault. Let him go." "Yes," Rogers nodded frantically, his face turning purple and his voice hoarse. "Mistakes were made. I lost everything. I'm just like you now." But Swift's look turned murderous as his eyes lit on the molten metal still pooling on the floor. "Well, maybe he did and maybe he didn't. But payback's got to start someplace, and I figure you'll do just fine." His lips parted in a cruel grin. "Let me be the first to give you a lesson about life on the street, pal. It hurts." With that, he went down on his knees, dragging the gagging Rogers with him, and forced the thrashing former banker's face toward the slag. Rogers shrieked, begging for mercy as the heat blistered his cheeks, inches from the burning metal. Perhaps it was the helpless man's pathetic cries for aid, or the look of perverse joy in Swift's face, or maybe the sadistic glee of the hooting and hollering onlookers he was held by. But whatever it was finally enough to make McKenna snap. He raised his worn old boot and stomped down as hard as he could. The man directly behind him yelped as his toes were crushed underfoot and his bear hug loosened just enough for McKenna to deliver a sharp blow to his ribs. As he folded completely, the tramp on McKenna's left turned just in time for the Irishman's fist to connect with his face. "Hey, you can't do that," the bruiser at McKenna's right exclaimed, or rather, he would have, had McKenna not knocked his forehead against his own, stunning him long enough to kick him back over the table behind him. Filled with a strength he hadn't felt in years, McKenna sprang forward and wrapped his arms around Swift's neck in a police academy headlock. While it was far from a perfect technique, it was more than enough to make the unsuspecting man drop Rogers, who scrambled away from the superheated metal and collapsed on the floor, staring at his savior. "Rogers," McKenna snapped, grunting with effort as the younger man squirmed under him. "Go get Foreman, now. Run!" The banker nodded, picking himself up and dashing off through the building as Swift flailed and struggled against McKenna's grasp. "You picked the wrong fight, Mac." His fingers trailed over the surface of the workbench next to them and grasped a large socket wrench. Snapping his arm back, he struck the Irishman a glancing blow to the side of the head. McKenna saw stars and reeled back, a gash across his temple oozing blood. Swift slithered out of his grasp, smirking as he smacked the red-stained wrench into his palm. "You stand up for those money-grubbing scumbags, you might as well be one of them. I'm going to take you apart, Patty, and they ain't never going to put you back together again." Blood dripping in his eyes and obscuring his vision, McKenna blinked it away and raised his fist defiantly. "Don't," he mumbled, "call me Patty." He ducked back as Swift swung the wrench in a vicious arc and cocked one arm, delivering a sharp uppercut that rocked the younger man's jaw. Flailing, Swift whipped the weapon around again. McKenna managed to dodge it, but this time Swift recovered his momentum quickly and jabbed the wrench into the Irishman's already aching gut, driving him back. "Too slow, Grandpa." He wiped blood from his mouth with his sleeve as he taunted. "If you picked all your fights this bad, it's a miracle you're still alive. But don't worry, I can fix that." He swung the wrench this way and that, forcing McKenna back until he finally bumped into the clanking conveyor belt that carried red-hot vessels of metal all to all the foundry crews down the line. Sensing his quarry had nowhere left to run, Swift smiled crookedly and brought his makeshift weapon around for the finishing blow. Looks like it's curtains for you, Mac. The turn of phrase was a lightning bolt that pierced through McKenna's haze of fatigue, inspiring a single and all-important question. What would Wilkins do? Use your enemy's own strength against them. Not quite, he grunted, stepping aside at the last second and catching Swift's arm. Letting his opponent's force do most of the work for him, he shoved it and the wrench into the inner workings of the conveyor. Swift screamed as the gears and machinery inside the belt tore the wrench away and crushed, ground, and twisted his flesh and bone in ways said items were never meant to be crushed, ground, or twisted. The entire belt ground to a shuddering halt, sending countless sprockets up and down the line, snapping off their axles. McKenna leaned in, pressing Swift's back to the belt as he slammed his fist into his nemesis's face over and over. He was so consumed by his anger, in fact, that he didn't notice the humming in his ears growing louder and the other workers scattering with yells of panic, at least not until it was too late. Looking up, he saw 50 yards through the smoke and steam, the plant's central boiler was bursting at the seams as the jammed belt completely stopped up the works. Rivets popped like kettle corn as the machine overheated far beyond its safety limits. Recognizing all too well what was about to happen, the Irishman only had one thing to say. Oh no, not again.
Oh, wow.
Little long, but I just couldn't think of anything to cut from that. So I was just like, oh, it's so good. I don't know. But anyway, hopefully you all enjoyed that. Thanks.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we did
you
enjoy
really
it. I
hard to
miss
want to break it to me.
McKenna. I read the first book, so. And well, before we forget to introduce Kyle properly, so he's a writer, editor, and all-around creative from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. So guess what? By day, he works in marketing at an online financial college, but his dream has always been to be a full-time writer. But he is also a second-degree black belt who enjoys teaching martial arts to the next generation. So that's why he can write fight scenes so well. Does that factor
One
in,
of the
Kyle?
reasons, hopefully. Yes, I had forgotten about the bio, but thank you for that.
No problem. So he, as you mentioned, he read from The Showstopper, and The Showstopper Returns, a sequel to his historical fiction thriller, which is actually a trilogy. And I'm
Yes,
one
so
of
there
those
will
waiting
be.
for the next books.
Yeah, the next one, hopefully, the first one is out already on Amazon. The second one, hopefully, will be next year, and then the third one the year after that.
Okay, excellent. So thank you, Kyle. So how's everyone so far? We're down 3 readers. And we move on to the next. And I'm starting to get a hang of flickering around the controls. This is easy, guys. So next, let's have our next reader. We have Dawn. So Dawn Kristina Jonckowski. Did I get that right?
Well done.
I won't say it again. So Dawn.
No, it's okay.
Is a writer, editor, dancer, musician, shoe connoisseur, and a lover of the Oxford comma. We probably won't get into that in the same way we don't get into Rebecca's hobbies.
Fair enough.
She's married to her very own rebel leader, and they live with 2 adorable yet spoiled dogs in Wisconsin under an infrequently seen single son. Why does that feel you're also describing England?
We're probably not too far off on, on the same planes there.
Yeah, so she'll be reading from the second book of her current trilogy.
Mm-hmm.
So The Ashes of Hope and Hunger. So let me give you the full spotlight, Dawn. And
All right.
away.
Awesome. Thank you. So just a little context for this. This is our first meeting of a specific character. One of the things that I love to do in my books is take minor characters from each book and give them a larger spotlight as the series continues. So this is a character that you meet in book 2, and she features a lot more prominently in book 3. So I wanted to introduce you to her today. On the empty bridge of Revelation, the captain sat in a darkness punctuated by stars and split by the single bulb of a desk lamp. She preferred the forced night, preferred these moments in the days before the storms where the crew maintained a more or less normal day-night cycle, and at some time that a clock deemed 2 a.m., She could be alone with her thoughts and directives and vague memories of what a normal day-night cycle was like. It had been a long, long time since she'd been on any planet long enough to establish a rhythm. Perhaps she'd been destined to be a rebel because she'd had a horrifying inability to sit still. She'd driven her elementary school teachers to distraction. Thank God the Global Alliance Flight Academy had taken early admission candidates straight from junior high with the right aptitude scores. Of course, that was about the only thing she'd be grateful for so far as it went for the Global Alliance. They'd made her a pilot, best in her class even, best in the Academy's history, she liked to brag when an administrator let her scores slip to the media. But they'd also made her an orphan. In the heavy dark of the bridge, she remembered the admiral who waited for her after graduation instead of her parents. He'd given her the news in quiet reverence and stood there while she realized that the blood-curdling scream was in fact coming from her own throat. They were supposed to be there. They were supposed to see her cross that stage, to see what her 6 years away from them had bought, a ticket out of the one-bedroom apartment they all shared, a ticket off Earth, a ticket to get her father out of the oppressive fumes of his fuel refinery job, a ticket to get him a new set of lungs and a house where he could breathe free. The admiral told her it was an explosion at the refinery and a subsequent heart attack when her mother heard the news. She dropped right there at the door where the shabby suitcases were stacked, waiting for the car ride to graduation. They were going to leave as soon as her father got off work. She threw her life into flight, met a skinny brown-eyed boy with glasses and a lopsided smile at a bar when she was running routine transport flights to the moon. He made her the finest old-fashioned she'd ever tasted, and 2 months later, they ran giggling into a courthouse in Nebraska, and he made her his wife. His mother cried into an honest-to-goodness lace hanky and filled her new daughter-in-law with barbecue and fried dumplings before the newlyweds drove back to Houston, caught a shuttle, and spent a few blissful days together in their house on the moon before the Global Alliance came calling again. She flew, and he mixed drinks, and they were happy until she learned the truth. 3 years into flying for the Global Alliance, taking the missions that no one else could, someone took notice. A fat, unmarked envelope fell from the stack of mission reports stacked around her on the kitchen table during a rare night at home. Frank Sinatra warbled from the hi-fi. Her husband insisted on the integrity of vinyl. Ice cubes clinked in the kitchen as her other half built new drinks that were either wild successes or plant poison and somehow never anything in between. Inside was a file folder and a Post-it note that said simply, "Don't you think you deserve the truth?" Her father hadn't died in an explosion. He'd been working with a resistance faction, developing a cheaper, longer-burning fuel that would allow rebel ships to fly faster with fewer stops, lessening their chances of getting caught. Except he got caught. The refinery explosion had not been an accident, and if her mother had had a heart attack, the Global Alliance gun that killed her destroyed any of that evidence. And the only reason she was learning this now was because it had taken the mole that long to find her. They left her a number to call, 10 digits heavy with the expectation of use. She told her husband late one night in his bar after everyone had gone home that they'd offered her a job. They wanted her to fly for the rebels, fly on the fuel her father had developed in a ship named after her mother. He kissed her forehead and mixed her a drink and promised to pack a sack lunch for her first day. They danced to Fly Me to the Moon before shutting off the neon and going home. While she was on her first mission aboard the Lucille, a Global Alliance pilot sat down for a drink on the moon and made her a widow. The mole had gone back to rescue her wedding album, her father's Bible, and her husband's ring, which he'd left on the lip of the sink while rinsing out the last of the barware that night. She hadn't been back since. And she wouldn't go back, not to Nebraska, not to the moon, not to the Global Alliance. So here she was, the dead of, well, some hour. When they finally convinced her that Lucille could fly no longer, she let them take her for parts. The crew mechanic later presented her with the ship's nameplate mounted on a polished piece of mahogany. It was the first time she'd cried in nearly 5 years. And then she boarded Revelation, a ship prematurely aged to look harmless. And here she was, Lucy Ann Armstrong Laval, 25 years old, captain of the rebel ship Revelation, speeding through the black of space on the orders of a woman whose name she didn't know and whose face she'd never properly seen. Because the Global Alliance had taken so much from her, and it was well past time she started taking back.
Wow. Wonderful, wonderful.
Thank you.
Nicely done.
That was lovely, Dawn.
God, that's
Thanks.
awesome.
Thanks. So Lucy is one of my favorite characters. She made her appearance. I'm what's called a pantser in my writing. I don't write with a plot. I have a point A and a point B, and how we get from A to B is kind of a mystery to all of us, mainly myself. So Lucy made her appearance late in book 2, and I really loved the story that she had to tell. And it's been fun to experience more about her and unpack a little more of her damage and what it might take to help her heal. So you get to know that a little more about her in book 3, which is ideally coming out in the fall this year, once I finish writing it.
So close. We're so excited for that, Dawn.
Thank you.
And now we'll move on to our dynamic duo. Let's welcome,
Hey,
well, ladies
Hello.
first, right?
absolutely. Unless the cat decides he goes first.
Oh, the cat. What do you want to introduce everyone to the cat?
If Squall shows up, we'll explain how he's the inspiration for a character in one of Kristina's other books.
Yeah, not finished yet, but hopefully next year. We'll see about that one.
All right.
But for now, I have a selection from The Kingdom of Elsewhere, which is an anthology I put together of some of my best speculative fiction. It's named after a short story that leads the book, because I write so much flash fiction that, you know, it seems silly not to pull it together and publish some books out of it. And so this one is, you know, most of this flash fiction doesn't actually have names, but in my head, I call this one The Power of Cream Pops. And it is in my Power Humans chapter. The courtroom froze in silence as Sally delivered her final word, pulled from the ether with the power of her voice. Truth. The crowd erupted, some in glee, some in despair, as the judge called for order. Sally barely noticed, drifting from the room in a trance. Her head throbbed and her eyes crossed with the effort of sifting through another person's desires and motives. A bailiff kindly held the door as she wafted toward the break room on autopilot, steering for the freezer where an ice pack was waiting for her. She pushed it onto her forehead, luxuriating in cool relief. Then she noticed the ice cream. Someone had left an open box of cream pops in the freezer, and there was one left. She hadn't had a cream pop since she graduated last year. Heck, since she started school. Despite the propaganda, there wasn't a high demand for truth speakers in the workforce. She'd been lucky to find an opening in the circuit court. It bought her some space from her parents and a lease on a cozy apartment, but not a lot of ice cream. Sally released her chestnut hair out of its professional bun to ease the tension in her head. I deserve a treat, she thought. Her truth sense echoed in the back of her mind. Truth. That perked her up, and she stuffed the ice pack aside, pulling out the cream pop. Cherry vanilla and low fat. It was practically healthy. Truth. She unwrapped it and took a bite. It was sinful and rich, with deep cherry tones under the smooth vanilla sweetness, and she hummed with pleasure as it melted on her tongue. Now I can relax. False. She froze, cherry juice dripping down her chin. What? Silence. She massaged her head with her free hand, as though she could shake loose an idea. She couldn't remember any reason to stay alert right now. What could her dreaded truth sense be on about? I can relax now, she asked, fishing. False. I'm late for a meeting? False. I forgot something. False. Darn it, what? Nothing. She scowled, licking ice cream drips off her fingers. Interrupted a man's voice behind her. Is that Harold's cream pop? Because I think he was saving it for his kid. Sally whirled around to face the interloper, face flushing guiltily. Oh, I thought it was for anybody, she said, contorting her hand to keep ice cream from melting across it without flagrantly eating it in front of him. His blue eyes drifted from her messy hair to the slow stream of cherry-flavored milk, and he smiled. Sally juggled the ice cream to her other hand and moved towards the sink, fumbling the tap more as an excuse to look away than to clean up. She knew Jacob by reputation. His name floated through the courthouse whenever a big case came up, the kind she wasn't trusted with yet. But they had never crossed paths, and she didn't know him well enough to say what kind of smile he was giving her. When she turned back around, he was still there, leaning casually in the doorway. I won't tell if you won't, he offered. Thanks, she said warily. He didn't leave. So, what are you in for? She took another bite, figuring if she was in trouble, she might as well enjoy it. Truth, chimed in her truth sense, as though she had asked. Jacob shook his head. Just renewing my license. I saw you in court. Looked like a tough case. Sally's temples throbbed at the memory. She needed to go home. Better than that, she needed home to be a cozy sofa smothered in blankets while soup bubbled on the stove, and old movies played in the background. But if she was going to fantasize about her dream house, she might as well add a kitten while she was at it. She needed a friendly face to come home to, someone soft and cuddly. Maybe next year, when her raise came in. For now, she had to concentrate on getting Jacob out of her face before her head exploded. I'm used to the work by now. It was all right. False. Really? Jacob asked, a mischievous grin lifting one side of his mouth. You must be talented. I like to think so. False. She smiled, yelling inwardly for her truth sense to shut up a moment. Maybe you could help me with a case in a few days, Jacob asked, smile fading. It's giving us a lot of trouble. Too many witnesses. They don't even know what they saw anymore. If you're game, I'd love to hear your opinion. She took another bite to buy time. Her head was killing her. Today's case had been tough, the hardest she'd ever dealt with, and this sounded 10 times worse. But how could she refuse the work? If she could make a name for herself in the downtown office, it could really boost her career. Truth! Unless she messed it up, in which case she would not only look like a fool in front of everybody she knew, she could lose her job and wind up back in Flipburger arguing with customers about their satisfaction refunds. Truth! Shut up! She howled inwardly. So, what do you think? Jacob asked, his smile rekindling. A playful, kissable smile. No wonder he did well in the youth program. I think you might be overestimating my skills, she said at last. His grin widened and his voice sounded in her mind, though his smile didn't budge. You seem all right to me. You're a telepath, she sputtered. Truth. Sally paled, trying not to think about her moaning over Flipburger, or how much she'd been enjoying her cream pop, or his smile. Were you listening? Wednesday, he interrupted, out loud this time. Introduce yourself at the desk. We'll be waiting for you. His eyes flicked down to the ice cream melting over her hand, and his eyes sparkled. I'll even stock the freezer.
Okay, I don't know what a cream pop is, but now I want one.
Yeah, I want one too.
Seriously.
All the cream puffs.
Same.
So,
Yeah,
was
she's got a
Kristina,
whole
everybody.
section of those.
I'm sorry, what?
Yeah, so that was Kristina. I will properly introduce you now, an author, mother, wife, and homesteader who loves to bring out the magic in everyday life. And we heard it in the form of cream pops. So she posts draft chapters, research notes, and custom stories for her patrons, along with free daily flash fiction for everyone on her Patreon page. She writes in all genres and lengths, but lately her efforts have been concentrated on short stories, which she bundles into anthologies such as The Kingdom of Elsewhere. Now, She hopes to release a cat antics romance and an anthology of all things witchy next year. So we're all going to be looking forward to that.
Yes,
that's
I
the-
am.
The cat,
I am
right?
working on it. Hopefully, I'll get them finished in time.
So now we know what everybody's working during the sprint.
Yes.
Well, we have the other half of the duo now. Let's pull that up.
All right.
And now it's time for Evie Brooks. So we're actually streaming to this channel. So thank you. And we did learn about how to stream, how to make YouTube and Zoom work. So, we're multitasking as authors.
Oh yes, yes, it's all been a big learning experience. It's been fun to watch. So when you guys see me glancing over here, it's because I'm trying to watch the analytics just to see what's going on, whether or not our internet connection killed everything on this end, etc.
Yeah.
So
I'm
far,
doing the
we're
same.
surviving.
Yeah, we are. So Evie is an author, scientist, husband, father, homesteader, philosopher. He's very busy. So he lives in Appalachia with his wife, 2 children, and many, many pets in a house they're building as they go. How many, many, many pets?
Oh
Just got a
gosh.
cat.
I was gonna say, if you count livestock, we're up to what? We have 4 cats, coming up on 3 dogs, a good dozen and a half ducks, 3 geese. One of our kids has a rabbit. It gets full. It gets full very quickly. So I have a separate trip for buying the animal food compared to the trees.
Ooh.
Do you have a partridge in a pear tree too?
Not a partridge, but there is a damn woodpecker poking at our house this last couple of weeks.
That's not part of the song, man.
Yep. I need to take it up with him.
All right, so take it away, Evie. He's reading
Sure.
from Sandstorm.
Yeah, so for context, I'm going to be reading out of Sandstorm, which is the sequel to Emissary. And I'm trying not to give anything away too spoilery here, but for context, we'll say that the main character, Ewan O'Meara, is about to make first contact in a new world. And he's got a little bit of pressure because his wife botched her first contact in the previous book, and that's a large part of what that book's about. So he's feeling a little bit competitive, I guess. That goes out the window pretty fast here, as you'll see. He went on, striking generally northwest and hoping to intercept the hunters, but the temperature swings were doing a number on his stats. His stamina was already tanked out, and on the daylit sides, growing bigger by the minute as the sun rose, his health was starting to drop. By the 5th dune, he was chugging potions, watching his inventory shrink through great vision as he swore to get back at Tree for this. There was no way she'd have insisted on no supplies, not if she was there too. To take his mind off his imminent death by misadventure, Ewan pondered just what he was going to tell the Kate Seath when he found them. Truth be told, he hadn't really put much effort into planning negotiations, seeing as how Tree was supposed to be there with him. She was the one with the political skills, not to mention the commanding presence. Maybe we can just whack the mobs together, he thought hopefully, then swore again when he cleared the next dune to see nothing but more sand. Or maybe I'll just beeline for Janai, hunting be nerfed. He kept on, though, pausing to rest in a last bit of shade behind a curved dune. He wished that Sarasa was more like the clouded wastes, then snarled as he realized what that meant. Drawing his behemoth horn swords, he stabbed the dune. I'm supposed to be having fun, he shouted at the frapping sand pile. This is a game, not an oven. The dune roared. Ewan leaped back, tripping over his tail as the sand shook. He just had time to see a figure in white come sprinting over the crest above before the whole dune exploded to his right. Sand flew everywhere, half burying him as the biggest mob he'd ever seen plowed through the hole, snapping at the white-clad player with teeth as long as Ewan's swords. Spitting sand, Ewan watched in shock as the monster kept coming through the gap, brushing the dune aside like water. It was low to the ground, reptilian, with a long neck like a snake, but even then it was a good 3 times as tall as Ewan was at the shoulder, and moving faster than anything he had left in him. Alex, I need stamina, he pleaded. That would be cheating, she taunted back. I thought you wanted to earn their respect on your own. Cursing enough to make Kate blush, Ewan did the only thing he could think to do. He clawed his way back to standing and took off, sprinting for all he was worth at the epic mob's belly. He nearly got clobbered when a massive leathery wing punched through the dune, but he had just enough presence of mind to grab one of the wicked barbs in its front and haul himself up. Giddily pleased that the brute would do the legwork for him now, Ewan clambered up the wing to the shoulder, then worked his way up along the massive neck, grateful that he had claws to hang on with. Ahead, he could see the white runner sprinting like mad up the valley, staying ahead of the Sinadjan, the monster. The dragon, he realized with a panicked thrill, was making as he gave chase. What in places are they doing? He thought as he grabbed that neck spine to keep from getting flung off. Then he heard cries, fierce and keen, from either side. Looking up in amazement, he could see dozens more Caitseath on the dune's crests, waiting for their prey to come within range. Realization dawned on him, and he whipped his gaze down to the fleeing figure, stunned by the runner's nerve. They're kiting this thing. The spears came, pouring down in a torrent from all sides. Ewan flinched as one struck home a few feet in front of him, sinking a foot-long blade deep in the beast's neck. The mob roared again, lifting its head to snap at a few of the Caitseath. But then the kite turned and threw something as well, something silver that struck the monster in the face and drew its aggro firmly back to them. Ewan let out a whoop of his own as he drew his own blades and gave the creature a few good stabs to be social. Some of the Caitseath seemed to notice him, pointing and rushing to each other as they shouted. Ewan waved back, riding it like some epic horse, but the players launched another volley of spears at him. Hey, he yelled, narrowly avoiding getting pincushioned as he dove forward. Hey, I'm trying to help. Either they didn't hear him or they didn't care, because more spears flew at him than at the dragon. Dodging for his life, he sprinted for the beast's head, hoping to get a little cover behind its horn frill, but then he saw the kite stumble and fall. The dragon bellowed in triumph, but Ewan rushed forward, swatting spears aside left and right as he sprinted the rest of the way and drove his blades at angles into its skull. It let loose an ear-splitting roar and shook its head wildly, but the swords held. Ewan barely managed to keep his grip as it tried to fling him off. He whipped around, the flailing giving him a break from the spears, and after a harrowing, weightless moment, he planted his feet between his blades. Wrenching hard to the right, he steered the monster, slamming its head into the dune's side and scattering sand everywhere. The impact knocked him free, and he half sailed, half tumbled forward along the dune, rolling to a stop beside the prone kite. Panting and near death, he looked up to see another barrage of spears sink into the dragon's neck and open mouth as it came for the two of them. Look out, Ewan rasped. He grabbed the kite by the shoulders, then flinched back when they slashed at him with a dagger. Get off me, demon, a young girl's voice hissed. He grabbed her anyway and threw them both aside as the massive head slammed into the ground where they'd been. She yelled in shock, then scrabbled away from it. Ewan lay there, staring in awe at the dead eye not a yard away from him, still glaring at him for ruining its owner's fun. Gems of old, he whispered, coughing as a shout went up from the dune crests. What was that thing? It was my kill. The girl spat and came at him with the dagger again. He tried to seize her wrists, but she stabbed him in the arm and sprinted off down the valley. A horn sounded from above, and a wall of silver light suddenly appeared. It shimmered like an aurora, curling around to corral them both, and the girl wailed in outrage. I have drawn the jinn's blood, she shouted, waving her little knife as proof. I am not allied with it. We shall see, came another voice, seemingly from the light itself. The wall emitted a shrill, fur-raising sound that brought with it a wave of dizziness, and Ewan lost his balance and passed out. So I will leave it to you to determine whether that first contact went any better than his wife's.
Wow, thank you so much, Evie. That was really good. So anything coming out for you later in this year?
Well, this year, I let myself get a little bit sidetracked. I don't know if you noticed when I pulled the covers up a moment ago for these books, but the art style has changed. Let's try this again. This way. There we go. The art style has changed somewhat from 1 to 2 because I switched cover artists. So I'm going to take a little bit of a breather from working on book 3, which is called Neverborn, to get book 1's cover art updated with the new cover artist. So hopefully it'll get a lot more of that anime opening kind of a style into it and really help bring the whole series together visually as a whole. So I'm super excited about that. And because I'm doing that, I'm taking the chance to write a bonus alternate prologue and, just spice it up a little bit more just for fun. So I'm hoping to get that out start of September. We'll find out. We'll see how long that actually takes to go. And then I'm going to get right back into editing Neverborn. I've had a couple of beta readers already looking into it. So thank you for your feedback. You know who you are. And we'll keep going from there. But yeah, I'm hopefully going to get back onto the schedule of 1 book a year. And we'll finish out the quintet, if I'm lucky, then by 2025.
Fantastic. Thank you, Evie, and thank you to your cat for the special participation.
Yeah, he's helping.
Yep. Thank you for covering.
Right. So now we're down to our last reader, and that's me. So I hope you're not tired of me talking. So I'll be reading from a new work in progress, which actually came up because I joined this writing challenge on Vocal, and they had one sentence that you had to start with, then you had to write a fantasy prologue from there. So if you ever need an exercise for your writing, you can always do the same and try to use this one. So let me start doing all these controls by yourself. So next time, guys, if there's quite a group learning point, we should have also someone else to man the controls and help out. All right. So I will now read. I've decided to actually pursue this into a full story. So I might be changing that first sentence because everyone else who participated in the challenge had that same sentence. But yeah, the idea stuck with me. So I'll be working on this and hopefully finishing. I don't know when, but we'll work on it. So I call the book Broken Wings, and this is the prologue. There weren't always dragons in the valley. What an odd code phrase. But that was what her mother had told her, and it was what she had left to go on. Her mother was gone. They'd both know she would be, and true enough, it had been sooner rather than later. Good thing they'd prepared a step-by-step plan for that unfortunate eventuality. Her body ached, her lungs burned, yet she continued to run without once sparing a look back. She didn't even bury her mother, since it hadn't been part of the plan. The next step was to get to the safe house at all costs, or whatever it was her mother had done would be all for nothing. Discovering her mother's crime was still several steps down that list, and grieving her was so much further down than that. She almost missed her destination, though it was not because of her rush to get there. The safe house lay in the middle of a narrow, unmarked street, one that she only noticed because she tripped on a loose stone right at its mouth. Then she pushed herself up and hobbled into the dark alley without so much as a glance at her scraped knee. She was a determined girl, that much was true. But her attention had also been stolen by the sole white door among the collection of blacks and grays. There weren't always dragons in the valley, she muttered to herself, just making sure she remembered the code phrase, as strange and meaningless as it was. What valley? She'd never heard of such a place. And more importantly, what were dragons? The word was foreign to her, and she only knew how to say it because her mother had drilled it into her head by repetition. Without any reason to dally, she knocked. Password! A voice boomed from the inside of the house, making her jump back in surprise. More peculiar sounds followed, one she couldn't make sense of. There seemed to be something large behind the door, its movements making the walls visibly vibrate. But there, she cleared her throat. There weren't. She swallowed, fighting down the fear she could feel brewing in the pit of her stomach. There weren't always dragons. Now she stumbled over the word, and she hated herself for her impeccable timing. In the valley. Dragons. Dragons in the valley. She was nervous enough that her words started slurring together. An ear-splitting clash answered her, followed by more shaking and some shrieking. The white door, however, impressively remained still. If it had a wreath or a fancy knocker on it, she was sure it wouldn't have budged at all. A little louder, please, thank you! She didn't know what came over her. Whoever was on the other side wasn't yelling at her, that she knew on a fundamental level. There was even a please and a thank you, though she couldn't entirely be sure and rule as sarcasm for that one. But she felt something hot burning deep within her, and the yelling had suddenly made it too much to bear. There was anger in the mix, plus some other emotions she didn't expect or recognize. Sadness was one. She thought sadness would be cold. And there was loneliness too. Loneliness at the realization that she was alone now. Loneliness that her mother was gone and she'd been instructed, not to cry. There weren't always dragons in the valley. She could swear she hadn't been shouting, but the white door rattled like she'd attacked it before exploding into 1,000 pieces from the heavy warmth that burst out of her body. The force of her emotional cocktail threw her back as well, and she crumpled to a heap by the brick wall across a narrow street. Yeah, girl, there definitely weren't always dragons in the valley. A shadow loomed in the doorway, making her unable to see past the wooden frame, but it didn't feel sinister or threatening. If anything, it was laughing, as well as coughing from the dust and smoke and whatever else her outburst had unleashed. And now we have one more. Why are you all so volatile anyway? The last one was like super weepy. What? The shadow stretched and slithered out of what remained of the door, its form becoming more defined the closer it approached. It was humanoid, or at least it appeared to walk upright on two legs when it seemed to have a couple more. From its back sprouted large wings that glimmered even under the weak light of the night lamps, and that sheen extended to its exposed skin. And there was a lot of exposed skin, as it had chosen to forego clothing altogether. It said it seemed to have opted to wear horns, and so many of them, like a fashion statement. It pointed at the house. Vale. Then it pointed at her, grinning. Dragon. That was the last thing she remembered before her world went dark. That's it.
Nice.
Yeah, so I pitched that as teenage dragons whose powers are fueled by emotion. So I can't wait to write, how when girls have that time of the month and everyone's like, you're acting like a dragon, you're so I want to make it literally happen at some point.
That's so cool. I want to read that.
That is epic.
I'd read
That's
it.
great. I want to read that. Yeah. I
Definitely.
love
sounds
fantasy.
fun.
So,
I would have been a teenage dragon.
oh yeah.
So we would be teenage dragons with cream pops.
Yeah.
Yes. Flying
You
in
could read-
starship.
Flying in
Dragon.
starships.
In 1937.
In
1937. hunting
One of
down
us is a vampire.
vampires,
One of us
Yeah.
is a vampire dragon.
and would spliced with mythological DNA with some creatures.
Just watch out for cat people with spears.
It's
Yeah.
true.
Yeah.
Well, there you have it. Those are our readings for tonight, and I had so much fun. Thank you, everyone. I think we all
Yeah.
deserve a
Yeah,
round
thank
of
you.
applause.
Super fun.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you. That was
Everybody was
blast.
awesome.
Also like to thank Dawn for preparing all the graphics and the presentations and putting together our social media deck. So if you need a marketing person,
Mhm.
Dawn's your
What I do.
woman. And thanks to Evie for figuring out the tech stuff together.
Well, it was a joint effort, and I will say, let me make sure everybody can give me their book links, and I can put that in the overall video's description once it goes
All
up.
right.
Yes.
Yes, and thank you, Marie, for putting this all together.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, that was
Yes.
amazing.
I hope we're doing it again sometime soon.
Oh, we
Yeah.
should be doing it again.
I'll actually not be lazy and read.
Yeah. Yeah, we
You weren't
also have
lazy, you were
some friends.
efficient.
The
That's true.
narration was awesome. So
Yeah,
Yeah.
he did a
That's
great
cool, the
job. So
part two
Thank you.
for her side of the narration.
yes.
Yeah. There's
I'm
a
here for it.
character that I like better, like that's my character, and in like Cobra Tongue, my magical college, and I'll read that like next time because that's cool. It's not narrated yet, but it will be eventually. And I will be doing that character.
And
Awesome.
hopefully the next time our other friends can join us. And if
Yeah.
there are any other indie authors, you can also join us as well. Just let us know, or you can follow the hashtag that we claimed on Twitter. And well done. They could also join the sprints, right? If they're available.
Join our sprint.
There's a
Yes,
lot
yep.
going on.
yes.
Every Thursday night, 7:00 Central, 8:00 Eastern, Kyle and I co-host writing sprints on Discord. You are welcome to drop in and join anytime. As we like to say, arrive when you can, leave when you must. Just show up.
Okay.
Anyone else has some last minute things to say or plug?
Mhm. I think we're good for now.
Just that everyone was awesome.
Yeah.
Yes,
I
well
enjoyed
done,
that. That was
everybody.
Awesome.
Well,
Yeah.
so much. And until next time.
Mhm.
Bye-bye.
Hey,
Bye. Have a good night, everyone.
Have a
Good
wonderful
night.
night. Yeah.